Chag Sameach, welcome to this Torah study session that we're going to have today. As you can see there, on this side, Rabbi Anibal, ready to study with all of you today. Hello, Debbie. Welcome. Helen, Murray, Shelley. Great to have you here. And it's still Sukkot. That's why you see the sukkah around me, or sort of. And even though it's still Sukkot, we are already preparing ourselves to study the Torah anew, to go back to the beginning, and that is the Parshat Bereishit, Genesis. So we are going to start studying that. Most likely, I don't know, still have to think what we are going to study next week. We might also continue studying a little bit more Bereishit. It's such an amazing Parsha, so much there to learn that it's one of the most amazing Parshiot of the Torah. Every word, and I would say sometimes even every letter of that Parsha has a beautiful teaching, so full of meaning. And by the way, remember that we are going to have a special Simchat Torah this Saturday at 7 p.m., the same channel that you're watching this class. It's going to be absolutely amazing. It's going to be a virtual tour of the Torah. It's about 20 minutes long with Rabbi Matthew and the puppets. And we are going to have virtual hakafot with the Torah and some singing and dancing. So don't miss it. This Saturday, 7 p.m. Winnipeg time, same channel you're watching this class. Okay, so let's see. Maybe we can start. And once again, remember, if this is the first time that you watch some of our content, remember to subscribe. So subscribe, hit the bell if you're on YouTube, or the thumbs up if you are on Facebook, so you will receive all the notifications every time we upload content or every time we go live. It's always good to be in contact. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to take myself out of the sukkah and into the text by the magic of technology. Look at this. Boom. Here I am now, ready to study. So one of the things that it's interesting about Bereishit is that, why don't we have Rosh Hashanah whenever we read the first Parsha of the Torah? If the Torah was created, if the world was created on Rosh Hashanah, why don't we start the Torah on that day? Because that's when we are reading about the creation of the world. Isn't that interesting? Because even in Rosh Hashanah, that's not even what we do. The Torah reading, we read about the binding of Isaac and other things, but not necessarily the beginning of the world. And that's why I wanted to bring this text from Rabbi Eliyahu Hoffman. I thought it was very interesting, and it will give us some food for thought to understand why purposely the rabbis didn't want to do Rosh Hashanah and the reading of Bereishit on the same day, because they were understanding life is not like that. Let's get to it. It says like this. The rabbis explain that the reason the days of judgments begin on Rosh Hashanah, remember, the Day of Judgment is talking about the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is because it is the anniversary of creation. Creation, in fact, began on the 25th day of Elul. Remember, we talk about this, that whenever we say that Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the creation of the world, what we are saying is Rosh Hashanah is the day where human beings were created. We still have to count back to actually go all the way to the 25th day of the previous month for the anniversary of God saying, let it be light. Okay? Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of God saying, Na'aseh Adam. Let's make man or human beings. That's what we celebrate on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because the rabbi understand that the creation, the end of the cycle of creation is when it should be celebrated, not at the beginning. Okay, but let's continue. But its center point and principal focus was the creation of man, who was created on Rosh Hashanah. In Jewish literature, however, we find that to every creation and every occurrence, there are two parts. And this is very important. Thought and deed. Thought is the potential creation, the dormant conception of the final product. Deed is when it becomes actuality, a tangible event. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the creation of man indeed. His conceptual anniversary, however, is in Parshat Bereishit. And I think this was very wise from the rabbis to keep it two separate dates. One for Rosh Hashanah, one for the beginning of the Torah, even though they both talk about the same thing. It's because this is the way life works. We have the concept of a project and the project itself. And it's never at the same time. And if you think about it, now we are going to read Bereishit next week, and then Rosh Hashanah is not going to be happening until another full year. So you see, we are looking at it backwards. Rosh Hashanah should happen, and then we are reading Bereishit, but it's all the opposite. Bereishit is going to happen in a week, and then a year after is going to happen Rosh Hashanah, and that's exactly what happened with all with this the concept of a project and the project itself. It's almost like the message here is this is not something that happened by mistake or in a rush. After the presentation of the project, a whole year happened until the project came to be. And I believe there is a beautiful message for all of us. Sometimes we try to rush through things in life. No, we have to take our time to think about what we are going to do. And then when we finally do it, then we have a better chance of success. And we shouldn't be surprised that every time that God creates something, God will say it, and God saw that it was good. It's almost like God is constantly checking what was done against a blueprint. What else? What was it? It was good. It was good. Almost like it came out exactly the way I envisioned it. So we have the two concepts, the project and the materialization of the project. Hello, Sarah Blumberg. Welcome. Tzohoraim Tov. Wow, I've never heard that expression before, but I like it. Okay, so let's continue with the beginning of all. The beginning of Parashat Bereishit, the beginning of Genesis. Very simple. You are probably familiar with this phrase. It says, Bereishit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And one thing that is interesting about this is that it's not even talking about the beginning of the creation, because we all know that according to the rabbis, the first part of creation was the creation of light. But if you read only the first verse, it says, Bereishit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, it looks like the first act of creation was the creation of heaven and earth, right? But no, the way this verse is understood is this is a prelude to creation. It's almost like the Torah is saying God is going to create the world. Okay? But nothing happened yet. It's a Bereishit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created heaven and earth, but God at this point didn't create anything yet. It's a presentation of what is about to happen. And this is sometimes a confusion, and I've seen it actually. It was a real situation, a situation on a trivia show, that the question was, what was the first act of creation according to the Bible? And the answer from the participant was heaven and earth. And basically they said, no, wrong. The first act of creation was light. And they said, no. If you read Genesis 1:1, it will say that the first act of creation was heaven and earth, Shemayim va'aretz. And I understand the confusion, but according to the rabbis, nothing was created yet, because we know that every creation, it will be preceded by, and God said. Nothing happened here. So that's how we know. This is just a presentation of what is about to happen, but nothing has been created at this point. Let's see a few of the comments here on the chat. Sarah is my favorite part of the Torah. Love this. Debbie Pollack said the word Shemaim has the word water on it. Yeah, one understanding of the word Shemaim is basically the translation, the literal translation should be Sham Maim. There is water. Because remember, we are going to see in a minute that there was this day of creation where God separated the waters below from the waters above. And the waters below is what we call the oceans and rivers and lakes. And the water above is the water that is on heaven, which basically that's the one that eventually create clouds and rains. So Shamaim is like a concept that there is water because God separated the two waters. Maybe that would be one understanding of the word Shamaim in Hebrew. Sham, there, Maim, water. Yeah, but let's continue a little bit. Let's read a few interpretations of this first verse of the Torah. I would like to present to you the commentary by Rashi. And Rashi presents something very interesting and controversial. He says, it was not necessary to begin the Torah except from this month is to you, which is the first commandment that the Israelites were commanded. For the main purpose of the Torah is its commandments. And although several commandments are found in Genesis, for example, circumcision and the prohibition of feeding the tithe sinew, they could have been included together with the other commandments. Do you understand what's going on here? Rashi is saying, why do we need the first part of the Torah? Why do we actually need the entire book of Genesis? It's totally useless because we have a couple of commandments. Big deal. God could have added those commandments, the book of Exodus, after the first commandment, that was the obligation to have a calendar. That was the first commandment, by the way, given to the Israelites after the Exodus. So Rashi is asking, why in this world we need Bereishit if it's not teaching us any halakha, any rules, any laws? Wasn't the Torah revealed to communicate to humankind God's will so we know what we have to do? If that's the case, book of Genesis is totally useless. But so it looks like. Let's keep reading. Now, for what reason did he commence with in the beginning of Bereishit? Because of the verse, the strength of his works he related to his people to give them the inheritance of the nations. For if the nations of the world should say to Israel, you are robbers, for you conquer by force the land of the 7 nations of Canaan, they will reply, the entire earth belonged to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it. This we learn from the story of creation, and gave it to whomever He deemed proper. When He wished, He gave it to them. And when He wished, He took it away from them and gave it to us. It's very interesting. So according to Rashi, the sole purpose of the book of Genesis is to make it clear that there is a creator, that is the master of the universe, and to make it clear that God promised the land of Israel to the Jewish people. That is a big part of the book of Genesis, the whole connection from people of Israel to the land of Israel. So we have the 3 concepts, which is the people of Israel, land of Israel, and Torah of Israel. So the first 2 come from the book of Genesis, people of Israel, land of Israel, and the Torah of Israel will come on the book of Exodus and so forth. Very interesting concept of Rashi. But it's also, to me, the book of Genesis is a book that contains a lot of wisdom to help us not just understand the law of the Torah, but also to understand how to have a better life in this earth. Let me explain. Let me expand a little bit what I'm trying to say here. I believe we have 2 different aspects of Torah. One is the law of the Torah, and the other one is the principles of Torah. The law of the Torah, the mitzvot, were given to us so we can prepare our soul to enter to the Olam Haba, to the afterlife, to heaven, to paradise after we died. And it's all good. But we also need the principles of Torah, all those stories around the law that Rashi said brilliantly here. They seem to be useless. Why do we need those stories that they are not here to teach us any law? Well, because those stories contains the wisdom to teach us how to have a better life in this world. Remember, the mitzvot prepare ourselves for the next world. The principles, the stories of the Torah prepare ourselves for this world. For example, you go to the book of Genesis and you read about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the things that they did, all the things that they were great, and all their mistakes, especially all the mistakes that they made during their lives, because that's one of the best ways we have to acquire wisdom, by learning from mistakes. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes, but there is a better way from somebody else's mistakes. So we read about what Adam and Eve did, and the mistake they made when they ate the forbidden fruit. We read about Cain and Abel and the mistake that Cain made when he killed his brother and he didn't take responsibility for what he did. So you read the stories that it has nothing to do with halakha, with Jewish law, with mitzvot, but then you learn something that it will give you the wisdom to have a better life here. And what I learned is, to acquire wisdom, you have to learn the rule of the 3 M's. You can increase your wisdom through 3 M's. Mistakes, either yours or somebody else's mistakes. Money, you can buy wisdom, right? Sometimes wisdom is a click away or a book away that it can give you wisdom. And the M for mentors. Sometimes you can get mentors in life that it will help you increase your wisdom. But most of the time, the mentors are mentors because they already made the mistakes and they will guide you so you won't. So, yeah, the book of Genesis is extremely important because even though it does not teach halakha, it's still teaching us so many other things to make our lives in this world a way better one. Very important. And yes, Shelley, you're right. The book of Genesis contains the covenant between Hashem and Israel. Extremely important. Extremely important. Eitan Pitch. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, buddy. Are you in the United States in these days? I'd like to know. Use the chat. Let's continue. Genesis 1, verse 5. It says, Vayikra Elohim laor yom v'lachodesh kara layla v'yerev v'yeboker yom echad. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And it was evening, and it was morning, one day. Hello, Eric. Welcome. So, what do we learn from here? First, that my computer doesn't like the grammar. It's interesting. My computer thinks they can outsmart the Bible. We learn about the creation of the first day. And there is also some halakha encapsulated in this verse, in the sense that we know now that we call the days, the way we call the days of the week. Remember, we studied this last class when we talk about the calendar, that we call Yom Rishon, is the Sunday. Yom Rishon, first day. Yom Sheni, that's Monday. Yom Shlishi, that's Tuesday. So we call every day we call them with a number. And this is because it's coming from the Torah. That's the way the Torah call it. And the same way that we know that in Judaism, day starts the evening before. So that's why, for example, Rosh Hashanah, we have Erev Rosh Hashanah, the eve, and that's the beginning of the holiday. Because according to the Torah, it was evening and it was morning, and that period that goes from evening and then the whole of the day is called a day. So for us, the day doesn't start in the morning, start in the evening with sunset. Very important. Whenever it's getting dark, that's the beginning of the Jewish day. So the first service of the day is not Shachrit, which is the morning. The first service of the day is Mariv. You might be aware of this if you are observing a yortzeit, for example, that you know that you always start the yortzeit the night before. And then you end the yortzeit the afternoon of the day after, the mincha, because that's the end of the day. Okay, so those are a few things that we learn from this verse, from verse 5 on chapter 1. We know that the days should go by numbers, except for Shabbat, because God called that day the Saturday. God called it the Shabbat. That's why we have a special name for the Shabbat. And we also learn from here that whenever we have light, it's called Yom, or day, it's coming from there. And whatever is dark, we call it Laila, which is exactly the way we call it in modern Hebrew as well, which is night. We have day and we have night. Why? Because it's coming from the Torah, in the book of Genesis. But let's continue to this. It says, according to the sequence of other things that we learn from this verse. Let's continue with Rashi. According to the sequence of the language of the chapter, it should have been written the first day. And this is written regarding the other days, second, third, and fourth. This is interesting because it doesn't say first day, it said one day. Why did Scripture write one? Because the Holy One, blessed be He, was the only one in His world. For the angels were not created until the second day. In other words, what Rashi is saying, when it says Yom Echad, should be understood as the day of the only one. And so it's explained in Bereishit Rabbi, in Genesis Rabbi, which is a beautiful book. If you ever have the opportunity to get it, it's pure gold. In these days, you can get it on Art Scroll. Beautiful, beautiful production, the beautiful edition that they did, which is the original Hebrew/Aramaic with a beautiful English translation of the whole Genesis Rabbah, pure gold. So basically it says that the language is not consistent during the first day because this was the day that the only thing that existed was God, and that was God's day, Echad. And it's very interesting that Echad, the word Echad in Hebrew, is also a word that we use to relate to God. When we say the Shema Israel, that we said Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. God is one. One. And so that's one of the things, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the concept of Echad. Very famous Rashi, yes, he was very famous, and things that I learned recently, that Rashi was also a wine producer. Looks like his wines were very good in Italy. Very, very good. So let's move away from Rashi to another rabbi who will bring another interpretation of this concept. This is Rabbi Mendel Rivkin. And another things, let me... I hate when this happened. Never mind. Okay, the word Echad is made up of three Hebrew letters: Aleph, Chet, and Dalit. Right. Echad, first letter is Aleph, second letter is Chet, third letter is Dalit. Echad. Aleph has the numerical value of the number 1. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with the Hebrew alphabet, every letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a number. So we can play numerology with the Hebrew alphabet. So the Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, will have the value of 1. Second letter of the alphabet is the Bet, has the value of 2. So for example, the word for father, which is Av, Aleph, and Bet, will have the numerical value of 3. 1 for the Aleph, 2 for the Bet. So, and you can actually use this kind of calculation for every single given word in Hebrew. You can take the numerical value of every letter and to combine them and to take the total value of the word. that is very common. There is a way to study the Torah, it's called Gematria, that it uses that technique of taking the numerical value of every word, putting it all together. It will give you the numerical value of the entire word. And then if you have two different words with exact same numerical value, even though if it's not evident, they will say that they are connected somehow, because it's almost like two different elements, but they have the same atomic component, right? So they are connected somehow. So it's our way to, it's our obligation to try to understand how the two words are connected. Because if they have the same numerical value, it means that their essence is the same. But I don't want to continue too much about that, because that's not the point of the class. So let's go back to the word Echad is made up of three Hebrew letters, Aleph, Chet, and Dalit. Let's study the numerical value of the three letters. Aleph has a numerical value of the number 1. Already said that. Chet equals 8. And Dalit equals 4, because it's the fourth letter of the alphabet. So, in the word Echad, 1 represents God. 8 represents the heavens and earth, because the Midrash and Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, talks about 7 heavens. 4 represents the direction on the compass. What Echad is teaching us is that the Chet and the Dalet, all of spiritual and physical existence, is really a part of the Aleph, the one God. So, in other words, God is one, but there's the 7 heavens and the earth and the 4 directions that we have here, right? North, south, east, and west, is something that is the way we understand or we relate to the world. God is above that. For God, there is no 8 and there is no 4. For God, there is only 1. One of the byproducts of creation was the 8 and the 4, which, by the way, is not a coincidence that one doubles the other. Right? This world is called the world of duality. Once God created the world, God also created duality. And that's the way we experience world. So that's why the first letter of the Torah is Bet. Bereishit in the beginning, but Bet, the numerical value, is 2. Because God started creating by creating duality. And everything in this world is dual. The only thing that is not is God. That is the only pure one, but unfortunately we cannot relate directly to that pure one while we're still living in the world of duality. The way we experience the world is through the 2, the 4, and the 8. That's the way we understand the world. It's Debbie, what are you saying? It adds up to 1. The 13 attributes of God is out of 13. Yeah, but you see, those are things at the end of the day when you study Kabbalah. Those are the way we understand. We have to put numbers, a measure. There is distance. There is quantities. For God, there is nothing like that. God is a pure one. In fact, Kabbalists will say that the number 1 we use in math is not a real one. The oneness of God cannot be represented by math. Because to say that God is 1 and compare it with the number 1 doesn't make any sense. Because in math, you have the number 1, and then you put another number 1, and then you have a 2. With God, you cannot do that, because there is a one God, and you cannot have another 1. So the Kabbalist will say, and I will say this and I will move on, because it's getting too complicated, that I will say that the 1 we have in math is not the real 1, is half of the number 2. It took me a while to understand it, but then when I got it, it's fascinating to understand the world that way, that we don't really have a 1 here in this world. What we have is simply the half of the 2. Let's move on. There is a tradition I'm pretty sure many of you know it, and when you recite the Shema Israel, to extend the final Dalit. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Have you ever heard about that? There is always, in every synagogue, there is at least one annoying millionaire that was going to do that and make everybody crazy, making that final Dalit very long and very loud. And then, of course, you have people who understand and say, oh, that's fine. And other people, they're visitors, and they will say, what's wrong with that guy? Well, because there is a tradition to extend and prolong and to make it louder the final Dalit at the Shema Israel. So, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook tried to explain, he's trying to get a little teaching out of that. And it says like this: why prolong the letter Dalit when say the Shema? Let's see. Dalit has a numerical value of 4. It represents the 4 diverse directions. Okay? The myriad intermediate means in the universe. By emphasizing the Dalit, we affirm the connection of these means to the unified goal of creation. Still, the heavens and the earth should not be disregarded. In order that the intermediate means will be properly valued, we need to contemplate the elevated counsel directing all events towards their purpose. And we should consider the value of the sublime goal as it is achieved and revealed in its splendor. Thus, the letter Het needs to be articulated clearly. Okay, so this is not just about extending the Dalit, but also the Ch, or the Echad, has to be articulated clearly. Because Het has the numerical value of 8, representing the 7 levels of heaven together with the earth. These 8 levels indicate the various stages, from the initial cause to its final practical fulfillment. In addition, the number 8 signifies the realm of time, the 7 days of the week, and the 8th dimension unlimited by the confines of time. Swallowing up the Het could indicate insensitivity to the value of the initial cause and the final goal. Then the intermediary events and actions of the world would lose their true significance. This is very interesting. This concept of the 7 heavens on earth is also a Kabbalistic concept of the needed layers of separation between us and God. Think of it this way. God is infinite. We are finite. So it is impossible, philosophically, it is impossible for something that is infinite to coexist with something that is finite. Either you are infinite or you are finite. You cannot be both. God is infinite, we are finite. So how can something infinite connect and coexist with something that is finite? The solution is layers of separations, almost like in-between things that we can't even imagine what that is. Those in-betweens, things that they are sometimes closer to infinite or closer to finite. And those are what sometimes we call the 7 heavens, but it's one on top of the other, and it's the path that the infinite being uses to relate and to connect and to coexist with the world, which is the totally finite place. So the last word, the Dalit, totally belongs to the 8th, which is the world. It's the lowest of the aspect. Here is when we have the 4 directions. But then we also have the other things that are in between, that just because they are in between, it doesn't mean that they are not important. In fact, we always try to get closer to the infinite by elevating ourselves, to try to be not in this lowest of the levels that we are, but to try to ascend to higher levels that they will get us closer to the infinite and to detach a little bit from the finite. That is what we do sometimes when we pray, when we study Torah, and when we meditate, sometimes using Kabbalistic teachings, that we try to elevate ourselves in those levels that get us closer and closer to God. It's almost like you cannot just be totally close to God. You have to go through those layers that it will get you closer and closer gradually. It's Moshe, Debbie said, Moshe did this. Yes, Moshe was the one who was able to ascend the most into all these layers, but he couldn't go all the way to the top. That's when God said, sorry, dude, you can come out to here, because if you go any higher, then you are no longer alive. If you come to the last level, then you got totally disconnected from the material world, and that means you are not longer alive. So there is that much that we can go up. Yeah, but yes, you are correct. Let's continue. Now, on Genesis 1, verse 7, it says, and God made the expanse, and it separated between the waters that was below the expanse and the water that was above the expanse. And it was so. And which is interesting about this, and that's basically, this is the only time that God didn't say that it was good. For every other act of creation, at the end God will say, and it was good. Not in this case. All what God is saying here is, Vayehi, and it was so. So why is this? Why God didn't say it was good by the creation of the, by the separation of the waters? David, yeah, day 2. Very good. We need to actually try to understand why there was not, it was good. And this is what the rabbis say about it. Why does it not say that it was good on the second day? Because the work involving the water was not completed until the third day. Although he commenced it on the second day, an unfinished thing is not in its fullness and its goodness. And on the third day, when he completed the work involving the water, and he commenced and completed another work, he repeated therein that it was good twice. Once for the completion of the work of the second day, and once for the completion of the work of that third day. It's almost according to this interpretation of Bereishit Rabbi, that actually the second day was not completed on the second day. God needed a little bit more time. So actually the second day was completed on the third day, and that's why when God said, and it was good twice. And this is a very interesting interpretation, but as you should know by now, it's not the only one. The rabbis have some other interpretations of this concept of it, why there is no, and it was good on the second day. Let's get to it. It says here, the Holy One, blessed be He, is teaching us a lesson through the events of creation that we as human beings must learn. Remember what I told you before? The law of the Torah and the principles of the Torah. This rabbi is saying, here we are in front of a principle of the Torah. Even though it's not halakha, it's not Jewish law, there is still something very important for us to learn that it will make our lives better. It says, He's teaching us a lesson through the events of creation that human beings must learn. This lesson is that it's not over until it's over. Sometimes things occur in life and we do not see the benefits therein. Sometimes we do not understand exactly what is happening. Sometimes we will be able to understand that the event was really about, what the event was really about, on the very next day. Then we will see the benefit of the inexplicable occurrence of the previous day. In the middle of creating the world, the all-powerful went out of his way to leave something undone, to leave something with a question mark at the end of the day, to leave something where the kitov, and it was good, was not immediately apparent. The lesson is that life follows the same pattern as the days of creation. We do not always immediately perceive the kitov, and it was good. Sometimes we do not even understand events the following week or year. Sometimes we don't even understand it until the next lifetime. But the lesson of the delayed kitov is that we should not expect to always see immediate results and immediate outcomes. Sometimes the good does not come until later. Wow. That is amazing, right? And stay with that. I'll be right back. Somebody is ringing the bell in my house. That's one of the things of teaching from the basement. I'll be right back. And I'm back. I'm sorry about that. The guy who came to repair my dishwasher decided to come 15 minutes earlier. Who knew that? Most of the time, they come late. Today, he came early. But let's continue with this class. But I think this is a great teaching from Rabbi Horowitz. Great, great, great teaching. And that's what I said. This is what I'm talking about. The principles of Torah. Understanding this, it will have a huge impact in our lives if we can understand this concept. That sometimes the blessings are not evident for a while. And we have to be patient until we can see it clearly and not desperate right now. But there is something else that I wanted to share with you about this Kitov. As a result of the fact that Tuesday had a double portion of Kitov, remember the third day of creation. So Sunday, first day, Monday, second day, no Kitov, not that it was good. Tuesday, third day, Kitov was twice. So the rabbi said as a result of the fact that Tuesday had a double portion of Kitov, that it was good. Tuesday is considered a particularly fortuitous, or I guess that means good, day of the week. Many people specifically plan their wedding for this day. When moving into a new house, many people plan to move on Tuesday. And many people try to start a new job on Tuesday, never on a Monday. Never do anything on a Monday. The superstition is Monday is a bad day because it doesn't have, and it was good on the Bible. And also they said never get married on a Monday because the Monday separation was created because God separated the water from above from the waters below. So for that reason, there is another explanation that God could not say was good because even though it was necessary, even though it was necessary because it implies separation, separation is never good. That's another explanation of why there is no Kitov. Because separation, even though it was necessary, it was not good. Yeah. How do I enable dictation? What is dictation, Debbie? You mean captions? I hope you're not trying to use the automatic captions on YouTube. They're terrible. Especially when I start talking Hebrew words. And yeah, not good. What about for holiness? What do you mean for holiness? Can you expand a little bit, Debbie? Let's continue with the next text. Now we move to Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Oh, to talk instead of type. Yeah, if you're using a phone, you can do that. I don't know if you can use it on a computer. It's why Mondays are not so good. Yeah, Mondays are not so good in the Bible. It's like almost like a cursed day because it doesn't have the blessing of God saying it was good. So that's why the superstition is Mondays are never good. Okay, Genesis 2. It says, and the Lord God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but on the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it. For on the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. Yeah, you know the story. It wasn't an apple, just wasn't fruit. We don't know which fruit it was. Yeah, that's misconception. That's Hollywood fault, right? We believe that the fruit was an apple and Jonah's fish was a whale. Sorry to disappoint. Chances are that neither of those are true. But this is out of all the wonderful stories that we have in Genesis, I wanted to study a little bit with you this commandment of having the opportunity to eat from every tree we have except for that one. Interestingly enough, this commandment enters or falls into the category of kashrut, right? Basically, what God was saying to Adam and Eve is all the fruits of every tree you look around is kosher. That one there is not kosher. Which one did you think they went and eat? The non-kosher one. So basically, it's almost like it's in our nature. All what we need is somebody to let us know, you are not allowed to eat that. Oh, thank you very much. And that's exactly what we do. We go and eat whatever is not kosher. But you see, the first commandments that Adam and Eve broke was a commandment related to kashrut. Have you ever thought about that? So that's why perhaps it's in our DNA that we are, one of the most difficult things about Judaism is to accept the dietary laws. So what we learn from this, let's continue. It's one concept that the rabbis learn from this story. It says, Kol hamosif gorea. Whoever attempts to add actually subtracts. For example, one who wrongly attributes a commandment to the Torah detracts from the Torah's effectiveness. This is very common, that trying to, and the rabbis made a lot of this, to try to add to the commandments, and unless there is something that is extremely important, extremely necessary, the rabbis insist that it's not a good idea to do that. How do we know that? Let's get to it. Rabbi Hizkiah said, from where do we learn that one who adds to God's words actually detracts from them? For it is stated in Eve's reply to the serpent, you shall not eat it, you shall not eat of it, and you shall not touch it. It was ultimately this addition to God's words that led to the sin. What am I talking about? Let's go back. You see, God said, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you should not eat of it. Because on the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. It doesn't say anything about touching it. All what it says is don't eat it. So how come now we have that Eve is saying to the snake, well, God's commandment says that we should not eat it and we should not touch it. Many interpretations of that. One is that actually that's the way Adam taught the commandments to Eve, because he knew that if he would touch the fruit, she would be tempted and she might be eating it. So it said, you know what? God said, don't touch it. Just to add an extra layer of separation. But even though we know that the rabbis use that thing a lot, which they put fences around the Torah, where the Torah said you should not boil the kid in its mother's milk, and all of a sudden, not only that you cannot mix meat and milk together on the same dish, you have to wait 5-6 hours, whatever, after you eat meat before you can eat dairy, and so many other things, different set of dishes, so forth. Yeah, that's kind of adding, right? And I don't know if we have so many problems with kashrut in these days because of all the additions, and it's exactly what this text is saying, but hey, what do I know? Let's read a little bit more here on the chat. Debbie, you said on Sukkot they put water on the altar because it was created by God versus wine, which is made of humans with their own effort. For God's love is universal and conditional. Okay, didn't know that. Water was thought to be for all the nations, wine for the Jews. Okay. So let's go back to the Talmud. here. So basically we learn from that situation that because Eve added to God's commandment, then the snake had an argument that ended up making Eve eating from the fruit. So the whole extra fence that it was put to protect the original commandment, that it was you should not eat, didn't really work. In fact, it was all the opposite. It made her eat the forbidden fruit. So, because Rashi said what happened is, even though it's not written in the Torah, the snake pushed her until she touched the fruit. He said to her, just as there is no death in touching, you see, you touched the fruit, nothing happened to you, so nothing will happen if you eat it. And Eve ate from the fruit. And let's study one more text here. It says, because... And to man God said, because you listened to your wife, and you ate from the tree from which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed be the ground for your sake. With toil shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Well, this is very interesting because we learn something from here that many of you might not be aware, even though I know that Shelly Chochinov, she is aware and she's probably guessing what I'm about to say because I talked to her before about that, and it's exactly the fact that the cursed ground means that we need to wear shoes outside because we need a layer of separation between ourselves and the cursed ground. That's why when Moses approached to the burning bush, God said, remove your shoes because this ground is not cursed, this is holy ground. Remember that text? Remember that Moses says that? So, this is what I want to tell you. According to the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, when putting one on shoes, the right shoe goes on first. When tying shoes, the left shoe is tied first. When shoes are taken off, the left shoe comes off first. This custom is based on the belief that the right is more important than the left. Therefore, the right foot should not remain uncovered, while the left is uncover. So did you see, this is all the laws that came after the fact that the rabbi said, yes, we have to use shoes, sandal, or something to separate ourselves from the ground. Why? Because the ground is cursed. And then basically when you remove your shoes, if you touch your shoes, you have to wash your hands because you're impure, because the ground is cursed because of Adam and Eve and what they did when they ate the fruit. You will see, that's why there is also custom among certain Hasidic groups to remove their leather shoes before approaching the gravesite of a holy person. This tradition goes back to the command to Moses when he approached the burning bush, remove your shoes from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. So the Hasidim believe that the gravesite of a holy rabbi is also holy ground. And if it's holy ground, you don't need your shoes. There is no problem for you to walk barefoot on that place. And you should also not bring the shoes that they walked on not holy ground, on cursed ground, on this holy place. And that's what I wanted to teach to you today. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah, Shelly, I know. That's why we had this conversation with Shelly Chochinov that she sometimes likes to remove her shoes at the synagogue for the same reason, considering a holy place. And this tradition is coming from all the way, could be traced all the way to the cursing of the ground because of Adam and Eve and what happened back then. So again, thank you so much for coming to the class. Chag Sameach, everyone. Only a few more days of Sukkot. Remember, tomorrow morning is already Hoshana Rabbah. It was going to be a nice service at the Shari Zedek. Hi, Michael. Thank you. Thank you very much. Separation good because it's holy. No, actually, Debbie, the rabbi said that separation is necessary, but not necessarily good, which is not the same. Necessary is not the same as being something good. So, Chag Sameach, everyone. I will put myself inside the sukkah once again by the magic of the internet. I love this. I can be whatever I want, right? I can be on the sukkah, or if you want me to go somewhere else, I don't know. let's put myself on Shari Sedek sanctuary now. Look, I'm going to move there. Oh, this is the other sukkah. Wrong sukkah. Sanctuary. Just like this. Thank you all so much. Great to have you here. Remember, Saturday, 7 p.m., we have the Simchat Torah virtual, same channel, 7 p.m. Winnipeg time. Don't miss it. Stay safe. Have a wonderful day. Chag Sameach. Hope to see you soon. Bye now.